Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys about the concept of training with high volume and even using accumulation training with 3 rep sets. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. All right, there's a lot of variations of this. I want to talk about the pros and cons of using this. A lot of successful strength and conditioning coaches take field athletes and use this method to bulk them up while making them faster, because that's always a concern with a field athlete. If they get bulkier, you don't want them to slow down. A lot of powerlifters use similar methods to this. A lot of coaches out there, again, take people into a new weight class doing this for Olympic lifting, also powerlifting. Paul Carter does a variation of this, so I think he uses a lot of 5 rep sets with the same concept, is what he calls his base building, for kind of an off-season strength and size builder to build up the base of a lot of his guys. And of course, a lot of you guys know Paul Carter is ranked very, very well at the world level in powerlifting, and he practically looks like a bodybuilder these days in his early 40s. So a lot of people utilize this method. In fact, we saw data a couple years back. Brad Schoenfeld did some research on this because, again, he studies basically bodybuilding, of how do you put as much size as possible on someone in the gym. And he had done a study showing with lifters who had a little experience under their belt already, that doing something like 7 or 8 sets of 3 actually put on just as much size as the guys who did traditional sets of like 3 sets of 10, which is like a traditional bodybuilding type of rep and set scheme. They gained just as much muscle. They gained more strength, but the problem is they spent over twice as long in the gym, which is one of the biggest downsides to a method like that. It takes a little more time to do high volume with triples than it does to come in and do 3 sets of 10 and get out on an exercise. But in terms of overall strength, power, things like that, it actually is superior in many ways. And one of the things that you need to look at here is the capacity to recruit upper threshold muscle fibers and the ability to maintain your speed. Now, what people need to remember here is that when it comes to generating maximum force, which is, again, speed equals power. Generating maximum speed with a muscle can usually only be done around 3 times inside of a 30 to 60 second block of time. It can take your peripheral nervous system anywhere from 30 to 60 seconds to regain the ability to generate maximum speed again in a muscle. So when you're using particularly nice, big, powerful exercises, you can get away with about 3 reps with maximum force, maximum speed and power before they start slowing down. Usually the 4th rep is a little slower, 5th rep slower, all the way down. One of the problems we can run into with using higher reps to bulk up is that the reps get slower as you go. Now, they'll still put plenty of size on you, they'll put strength on you, but they may not be ideal for training speed, generating maximum force, maximum speed. So what we need to look at here is this is a viable method for both bulking up and gaining power. And there's a lot of ways you can do it. Some people will do methods where they just come in and they train with something like a 5 rep max, and they'll do high volumes of triples, 8 to 10 triples or whatever. When they can easily do 10 sets of 3, they'll add just a little bit of weight. And that's one way to do it if you're trying to focus upon maximum strength with it, but that isn't the only way to do it. What's actually more common is to drop the weight down even a little bit more, sometimes as low as 60 or 65% of your max. And in that way, you can generate maximum speed with a slightly lighter weight. Now, what people need to remember, people think in terms of reps and sets as far as muscle fiber recruitment goes, right? Like how many reps you're doing versus your max. But the truth is, that's assuming a constant speed. When you push the same weight faster, you actually recruit more muscle fibers on the concentric rep, all right? You recruit more muscle fibers on the concentric rep. So you can actually get as much muscle fiber recruitment with something like 65% of your max for a triple as you can with 75% if you move it faster. The upside is that it does a little less eccentric loading. Now, we can argue that eccentric reps are a useful tool for gaining muscle, but they're not guaranteed to. What you oftentimes find is that if you can do more total volume on the concentrics, it will offset any loss of reduced efficiency of eccentric reps. And if your goal is to generate maximum muscle mass with maximum power, you need to be focused on the concentric. So for people who want every ounce of muscle they gain to be as fast and explosive as possible in terms of performance in some way, which is never a bad thing. Never a bad thing to be faster. It's never a bad thing to be able to generate more speed for any sport, even for defending yourself. I mean, even for you guys who might find yourself having to defend yourself in a fight or something, being faster is good. You know what? Having to run for your life from something, being faster is good. This generates to better sprint times if you're doing it on things like squats and deadlifts. So there's something to be said for that. And a method that I usually like to use for people is to do accumulation training. I recommend people do accumulation training. Start with a weight as light as 60 or 65% of your max, and take some basic exercises at least 3 days a week. Some people can run it all the way to every day, but you got to be very, very careful with this. Start with 3 sets of 3 with maximum speed and add a set. Add a set every time you train. Every time that you're able to come in and add a set without the bar slowing down, add a set. And that 3 sets turns into 4, into 5, into 6, into 7. And when you get to where you can do 10 sets of 3 with any given weight relatively quickly, and it's fast all the way on the 10th set, you can add a little bit of weight. It doesn't have to be a lot, 2-3%, maybe 5%. Drop back down to the triples and reload the same thing. All right, and this is a great method for general size and power buildup. And a lot of guys will be like, I don't think I'll get that big doing that. Well, you'd be surprised. And again, when you understand that you are hitting all the available muscle fibers, upper threshold fibers on every rep, when you get up to where you're doing 3 sets of 10, 3 times a week on big movements that are hitting the upper threshold fibers every time, you're going to be surprised how much size you can gain out of that. It's actually, again, like we said, Brad Schoenfeld's data showed that 8 sets of 3, which is less total reps, put on just as much size as 3 sets of 10. So using accumulation type training like that is actually a very, very good method of progressive overload, because you just keep adding sets. And as long as you can maintain maximum speed and technique, you can keep progressing that way. This is a great way of, again, general buildup for field athletes, contact sport athletes, but the general fitness enthusiast can use a method like this also. And you don't have to necessarily run something like this year round. This can be done in phases. This can be done in what's called accumulation phases sometimes. You could run this for up to 6 to 12 weeks on something like this if you really wanted to, then switch over to a more traditional style periodization. But it's a very, very viable method of training, particularly for people who are trying to be as fast and explosive as possible. And it is geared better towards more explosive lifts, push presses, overhead presses, power cleans, pin lay rows, deadlifts, squats, front squats, things like that. It also works on things like bench press, closed grip bench press. And obviously guys who are like, well, I'm still going to need to isolate, some of my smaller muscles because I'm doing this and I want to look good and I have certain proportions I want. Well, that's okay. There's nothing stopping you from doing a few curls and lateral raises in there. The same thing, you can come back and do a traditional 2 to 3 sets of 10 reps on some of those and go ahead and finish off those little smaller muscles. Guys who are trying to get explosive and everything, but they want a little more bicep or whatever it happens to be that they want. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. Nothing stopping you from doing that at all. So that's the thing that you need to remember. You can always plug in a little bit of accessory work on any program like that to kind of fill in your weak links, whether that's performance weak links, aesthetic weak links, whatever it happens to be. But yeah, high volume training or accumulation training with triples is a fantastic way to train for people who want to gain size, speed, and explosiveness at the same time, who are really, really concerned with gaining all of those things. It's a fantastic way to train to do that. The biggest downside, like I've said before, is that it can take a little more time in the gym on each exercise, but you're probably not going to do a lot of exercises. And you do have to watch for overtraining a little bit more, because it is a little harder to recover from 10 sets of 3 done very explosively than it is doing 3 sets of 10. All right, particularly on your nervous system, because it does produce almost similar levels of metabolic fatigue, but with a lot more tension involved sometimes, or direct muscle fiber recruitment on every rep. So it can be, again, a little harder on your nervous system, so slightly harder to recover from, but as long as you can manage the recovery, you can manage deloads and things as needed, perfectly acceptable and great way to train. Just be aware it is slightly easier to overtrain with it, and you will spend a little more time on each exercise. But if you start cutting those breaks down to a minute or less, really isn't that bad, because you can cut down to about 12 minutes per exercise. And if you're coming in and doing 3 or 4 exercises in the gym, you can be out of there in less than an hour. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.